Okay, we are live at 11:05 IMBC. This is Spirit Cars, and today we're wiring. And it's like a lot of wiring. Pretty much electricity is a simple thing. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a pond story first. Water goes downhill. Electricity goes to ground. It just goes to ground and it takes the easiest path to get there. Water goes downhill, takes the easiest path to get there. If you got mud and you got rocks, it's going to go through the mud, it's going to dig a trench. So I got a pond in my backyard. I'm all about it. My son decides we needed about another 1.5 feet, 18 inches to just get it to the level I wanted. We sculptured our pond. It's all the man-made pond that looks like it's natural. So we rocked this all up and had it, and man, it's perfect. It's looking good. But whenever it rains a lot, and we've got a lot of rain, it goes over the edge. So when it goes over, it's causing this turbulence behind it, and it's washing it out. And all of a sudden, I started getting a leak under my rocks. And I just started getting bad. And it would have been demoralizing and depressing. All my koi, it's a big pond, but it's my pond. So the water starts going through underneath, and then as it goes through, it wears pressure, getting a hole. So we stopped it on the outside, and I rocked on the backside again, so we got it stopped. Electricity is a lot the same way. And I'll try to make that analogy also. So it starts at positive, and it goes to ground. And whatever it goes through, it creates some kind of friction or something. If it's a headlight, it lights up the bulbs. If it's a starter, it engages the starter and goes through the windings. If it's whatever it is, it does something. And you're sending the power through that route. But again, it's always going to go the path of least resistance. So sometimes if your lights aren't working, maybe it's like you turn your turn signal on, and then all your signal indicators are just staying lit, or the wrong side's lit, or some funky thing is lit somewhere. It's probably a ground. Most likely it's a ground. And it's wanting to feed back through the system. And so grounds are important. Good grounds are important. And what'll happen if it's wanting to go through a dead short, it's kind of like that pond overflowing. There is a pond full of water wanting to get out. You've got 12-volt battery with power wanting to get out. And if there's just a little way of escape, it's going to try to get out of there. And if you've got two wires touching, just ground to positive, it's going to try to go through ground, but it's going to make it dead short. That's why you see a spark. And it's going to start arcing, and it's going to burn a hole until it's all out and gone, and there is no more connection. So it will burn a hole in that wire. It'll burn a hole in whatever. Probably I'm just in case you hadn't figured it out, I'm just randomly going on here. So yeah, I'm getting a nod from behind the camera. One of the key areas when you're doing a loom, we got fuses, we got a fuse block, we got different, there's all flashers, all kinds of different parts. To keep the battery charged, you're going to have an alternator in there, and there's a 2-wire and a 1-wire alternator. Most all the alternators anymore are 1-wire. I would highly recommend, since your alternator is probably going to be like they say, it's not the volts that kill you, it's the amps. Most alternators, you're going to want probably a 100 amp alternator. An 80 amp, is minimum, but that's a lot of amps going through a wire. And then this kit's got a separate wire for that. There's fusible links in some of them. This one doesn't look like it, and it doesn't say it on here, but I'm assuming this is going to be an alternator wire. I like to, if at all possible, and this is just a recommendation.
How many circuits do you use for a T-bucket?
We have a 12 circuit wiring kit. This is a 20 circuit. It's got wires everywhere, dome lights and all that. You don't need power windows, you don't need a trunk light. So there's a lot of different 12 circuits available. So that's what we use for a T-bucket. This is a 32. This is Kendall's car. Kendall, thanks for the support. Hey, I'm going to give you a shout out here a little later, but anyway, this is Kendall's car. This is Dorothy. Just working through this. Anyway, run the alternator wire on the outside of the car if possible. Go from the alternator to like the starter, where your power comes onto the starter. That way, if you do for some reason get a short or something and this wire gets hot, this wire will get hot enough to burn. Before the wire burns, all this the rubber casing is all going to melt off of it. And if I've got this wire running in a loom through all these other wires coming, they don't even give you a very long one here, but if I'm going through my loom, going up here, coming out here, by the time this puppy gets hot enough to start melting, I have melted my entire loom coming out, going this way, and I've got either a fire that's going to burn down my car or a gigantic mess in my wiring loom. So if this is outside the car, you know, around the motor, don't put it up against your exhaust or something like that, but you know, just tuck it in. Clean is, you know, we want it to be clean, pretty, not seen. That way, if you do have an issue, this is the, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems of starting a fire with enough amps. Everything else should be fused. You'll blow a fuse before anything, but you're generally, unless you put a fusible link in there or something like that, that could be a potential problem. All right, so we're wiring a big car, and I put this one here. I've never used QuickWire. I'm not saying QuickWire is good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying I've never used it. I've opened the box. I'm not familiar with it. It comes with Tweety. So this came with Tweety, and that's what we're going to use. The customer gathered up all the wires. The company we used for a long time is no longer making the mini fuse 12-wire kit. So now I'm having to do another one. You know, again, it's our 25th year of doing this, so you kind of get used to certain things. The times are changing now. Isn't that a Bob Dylan song? Vendors are coming and going, and you know, so there's a bunch of different brands. Just like I'll save my trigger time for later, but there's like a bunch of different denominations out there. But the goal is all the same thing. If I pull the switch, I want my lights to come on if it's the headlight switch. If I turn the key, I want the ignition to start. So there's some fundamentals that we need to get done. And which wiring kit you use to do that, that would be your choice. If you've, in my case, I've used the same wiring kit for many times. I can just look at a wire and go, that's a pink wire, so this will be, you know, fuel. This one is, yeah, it's a relay wire on this one. This is a power window, so, you know, you never know. But the looms that I used to use all the time, that's what they were. A purple would be a power antenna wire. I'm just remembering, but that's not so on this one. Browns are usually your, and I'm doing the light switch now. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. So I'm putting the light switch together now. Browns were generally, did I have glasses? Surely I did.
Right there.
Would be a running light. So this one is a tail light, and then this is probably the park light. So it's a lot easier if you're kind of familiar with it, but if you're not familiar with it, the instructions on this one, not so good. I mean, there you go, figure it out. Instructions on this one, better, but you know, maybe I don't need to know all this information. I'd rather just have it wired up in my loom and I don't have to deal with it. You can get a fuse block and start from scratch and just wire your whole thing yourself. Bottom line is, start by figuring out what you want. This car has power windows. This car has, I don't remember if it has door poppers or not, but I'll need to find that out. This car has a tach. Some cars won't have a tach. This car will have a radio. This car's got a dome light. This car's got a lot of different things that maybe you wouldn't have, especially in like a T-bucket. So pre-plan all that before you start. Just start thinking about it. And even though this is a wiring kit, whatever that means, it's already got a fuse block and it's loomed going this way and that. That doesn't mean it's going to work for your application. I mean, we're hot rod building here, and at Spirit Cars, we kind of do two things. I was having a talk with somebody this morning. We build hot rods, street rods. It's kind of custom one-off. Here we are, and we build Spirit Cars, manufactured cars. It's a manufactured hot rod, so we try to keep the fundamental things the same. My wiring kit, we try to have be the same on every car. You know, you might have a couple different options, but even if you don't want a cigarette lighter, I'll have the cigarette wire there wrapped up. It'll be if you've got a car that's been done by us and it doesn't have a cigarette lighter, which nobody uses, but you got to plug in your phone. It'll probably be rolled up like this, tucked in behind there's a double dash there, tucked in down there, terminated on the end so it doesn't, you know, cause some kind of short. So that two different things. We do Spirit Car assembly cars, pretty much consistent, the same every time. And again, we're kind of in the process of figuring out what the next best wiring harness that we like, because the times they are a-changing. And this universal 20 wiring kit, I'm not sure I like it. I mean, it's fine, it's good, it's functional, but it just, you know, I don't know that I like it. There may be better one. It's not a quality issue of the product. Quick wire, again, I'm going to use that one a little later. There's a bunch of other ones. Easy wire, painless wire, just a bunch of other ones. And we used to do painless all the time. Or easy wire, not painless. We used to do easy wire all the time. They just changed their block to be bigger instead of the mini block for the T-bucket, so I didn't like that change. So I guess maybe I'm just too picky. I'll have to get over it. But as long as I pull my headlight switch and my headlights come on, I push my dimmer switch and the headlights go dim, or I turn my turn signals and it's right, left's left, and my flashers flash. I turn the key to start it, it starts, and everything's functional and going, and no shorts, and it's neat and tidy. What more does the guy want? So I don't know if I was helpful on wiring for you today, but that's just some of my ideas. If you're going to take one note away out of it, the alternator thing, I would definitely, if possible, run that outside of the car. So that's about it. We got trigger time. This is the part of our show that I call trigger time, and we're doing a pretty good job at it. So when I say trigger time, do not misunderstand me. Don't put your faith in a man. If you're going to put your faith in a man, here's the one to do it to. The Son of God. He was born of a virgin, so he wasn't even born in sin, but he lived a sinless life, and he was able to take and he's our kinsman redeemer. He paid the price for our sin where we couldn't. I mean, he sits at the right hand of God now. I mean, if you're going to put faith in a man, that's the one. And, everybody else has failed. Who can know the mind of God? It's just not possible. So I don't care if you're a preacher that can fill up a football stadium, or you're a missionary that goes to an unreached people and gives up your life just to reach that person, or you're the little old lady prayer warrior that is constant in prayer for the saints, or you're a deacon that's getting the lawn mowed and taking care of the business of the church and visiting the widows when they're in need and seeing and doing. I don't care. None of us know the mind of God. Trust me when I say this. Don't believe anything you see, hear, or read. Do your own research. I'm telling you that just because I said don't believe it. Do your own research. And it's in the news, whether it come from the pulpit, whether it be from a teacher at school. We are in the untimes, I like to call it. It's the time we need to unlearn a lot of we've been told is true. So it's the untimes. We are at war. Do not be deceived. We are at war. And this is a battle. It's a spiritual battle. This is a biblical proportions. It's epic. Put on the full armor of God. Be ready for battle. And this is for you, Kendall. You brought this to mind. This is your car, but you brought this to mind as far as you said something on one of the posts. Just ignore the naysayers. And I kind of said, no, we can't do that. We need to be gentle as doves and wise as serpents. And here's why I say that. Okay, now again, we're going to read scripture. We still live in a country where I can do this without hearing the king say off with his head. So I don't know how many people know the story of Paul. Saul. Do you know the story of Saul, Paul? No. Yes?
Maybe.
So Saul turned into Paul, but Paul was Saul. Okay. So Saul was not a nice guy. He was a very religious guy, and he had a zeal for God, but he was killing Christians, or at least holding the coat of people that were killing Christians, and he had papers going to another city even to go persecute the Christians. So on the road, he kind of met up with God. God's like, hey, what's up? And a big flash, and he was blinded anyway. So we're going to take it all the way to, so he goes to where he was going. And he gets there, and he's there kind of going, he's praying. It's like, okay, now I see the light. Jesus is who, I'm not processing, I've seen the light, but I've seen it so bright I can't even see now, I'm blind. And so he's sitting there praying, wondering what's next. And he's, okay. And now there was a disciple at Damascus, that's where Jesus went, named Ananias. The Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias. And he said, here I am, Lord. And the Lord said to him, rise and go to the street called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for a man of Tarshish, that ain't how you say it, but named Saul. For behold, he is praying, and he has seen a man named Ananias come in and lay his hands on him, so that he might regain his sight. But Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much evil he has done to thy saints at Jerusalem, and here he is with authority from the chief priests to bind all who call on thy name. But the Lord said to him, go, for he's a chosen instrument of mine, to carry my name before the Gentiles, and the kings and the sons of Israel. For I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. So Ananias departed and entered to the house and laid his hands on him, and he said, Brother Saul, the Lord who appeared to you by the road, and which you came, has sent me that you might regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And immediately something like scales fell from his eyes, and he regained his sight. Then he rose and was baptized and took food and was strengthened. So we're in a war, we're in a battle, but the craziest thing is none of us knows the mind of God or what his plan is. Our biggest enemy may be who God has chosen to be the general of the army maybe next year. So who are we to make that judgment? I mean, judge not least to be judged. We just better focus on prayer. I'm still working on that, trying to figure that out, but I mean, there's prayer involved here. It's just, we ought to focus on prayer. It's a battle. It's a biblical proportions. It's not against flesh and blood, but it's against the principalities. Put on the armor. Until tomorrow, I'll be wiring. I'm going to really try to focus here. We're going to get the electricity going from positive to negative with no interruptions in between unless it's supposed to be there. And then tomorrow, I don't know what we're going to do, but we'll do something. Have a great day.